feel smarter already just sitting there.
We'll reconvene the Senate Appropriations Committee for our hearings on the Governor's 2016-2017 budget request. Thank the members for returning for this afternoon's hearings. With us now is officials from the Pennsylvania State System of Higher Ed, led by Chancellor Brogan. Chancellor, thank you for your attendance and your participation. Can you allow your colleagues to introduce themselves to the committee, please?
Yes, sir. We'll start on my left, your right.
My name is Lois Johnson.
Into the microphone, please.
Lois Johnson. I'm the Associate Vice Chancellor for Administration and Finance.
Welcome.
I'm Mike Driscoll. I'm the president of Indiana University of Pennsylvania.
Welcome.
My name is Drew Johnson. I'm a student government president at East Stroudsburg University.
Pleasure to have you. Thank you. Before we start, can I please ask you to stand to be sworn?
Yes, sir.
You swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Please swear or affirm. Thank you. Please have a seat. Chancellor, you had indicated to us that you'd like to make a short opening statement.
Just several, and if you'll indulge me 1 second before I do that, you've met the members of our panel, but I also, Mr. Chairman and members, wanted to acknowledge some of the folks who are with us today from the Board of Governors. The Chair of the Board of Governors, Guido Pacchini, is in the gallery today. Ron Henry, who is a member of the board and also Chair of the Finance Administration and Facilities Committee. Obviously, two of your members are members also of the Board of Governors, and I want to acknowledge and thank Senator Alway and Senator Schwank for their constant participation in the work of this state university system as full-fledged members, and we appreciate that very much. Also wanted to introduce and acknowledge Marcia Welsh. Dr. Welsh is the president of East Stroudsburg University, who is with us today. Jody Harpster, President Harpster is the president of Shippensburg University, who is here today. President Solz from Bloomsburg could not be here, but sent Dan Knorr, who is a member of staff there from Bloomsburg to represent that institution. And joining us today, President John Anderson from Millersville University, Mr. Chairman, are all joining us today. So thank you. And very quickly, members, first of all, thank you for giving us this time today. I hope it will be useful information that we provide. As noted by the chair, we brought with us again this year a president and a student, knowing how much the members like to work with people who are literally on the ground at these 14 institutions every single day and get their perspectives to the questions that you all have. I wanted to let you know that we have begun a partnership with Georgetown University and the Center for Education and Research. They are working very hard on trying to determine who in the country is already working to try to align their higher education curriculum and programs to a much greater extent with the world of work. And they found it interesting, some of the work that we have been doing as we organize around the issue of supply and demand. We're under the belief that if we can do a better job of understanding what the needs of the Commonwealth are, members, and what we turn out to contribute to that by way of skill sets and degrees, we can be better partners in the future of the Commonwealth. They've noted that. They did a study and a survey, and they found that 60% of the jobs in Pennsylvania will require at least some post-secondary education by the year 2020, which makes the work we do not only important, but more important than ever before, as we're partners with the state relateds, the community colleges, and the privates in terms of meeting that sort of a meaningful goal. Over the last 5 years, our universities, our 14, have increased the number of degrees awarded by 10%. Even though we have been dealing with a declining enrollment over that same period of time, we have managed to drive up the number of people who are actually being awarded degrees, more efficiently helping to take students from matriculation to a diploma, even in the face of declining enrollment. And while we remain a major producer in areas such as education, we've got 11,000 students currently enrolled in education programs in our system, business, the arts and humanities, we've increased at the same time the number of bachelor's degrees awarded in STEM STEM and educational healthcare fields by 37%. That was noted by Georgetown as a very meaningful increase in better balancing our academic portfolio. Real quickly, we continue to work on aligning our programs to meet the needs of the Commonwealth, and at the same time are looking to make sure that embedded within every course and every degree are also those skills that every employer expects when these students come out of school, like critical thinking skills, communication skills, problem-solving skills, and the like, which should be a part of every major course of study regardless. We also, as I say, will be working on this supply-demand gap analysis, which will not only be important for us, Mr. Chair, but I believe will be important for all of higher education in this state, so that we as a state system of higher education can do a better job of more strategically working to meet the needs, and at the same time giving our students a much clearer pathway toward what careers exist, how much those careers will pay, and what the availability of jobs are in those areas. Are they oversaturated or are they undersubscribed, so that they can make a better decision as to what track they would like to follow toward a degree. We're a good investment for our students. We are still, not only because Act 188 requires it, we still, because we want to and need to, pay very special attention to the bottom line, trying to keep our costs down and trying to remain affordable to the students who are in our charge. It is getting difficult to hold it down completely. Times are tough. Costs continue to escalate, but we're still looking for ways to become more efficient with what we do and how we do it. That's our obligation to the students we serve now and in the future. You all might be interested to know that we serve a higher percentage of Pell Grant recipients in our system than in any other higher ed sector in Pennsylvania. Some 37% of our student population receive a federal Pell Grant, meaning that their family status on an income side is low enough to warrant that request on their part to receive such a Pell Award. We have an annual economic impact of about $6.7 billion to the state. That comes from a recent economic impact study that was done by an outside interest, and we believe we are a very meaningful part, not only based on what we turn out by way of graduate, therefore workforce, but also just the fact that we exist and what we contribute to the overall economy of our regions and the state overall. I did not mention, and I should, because some of you may be on the FIA board, that 32% of our students also receive a FIA award. Very important. And as I said at the other end of the hallway, cling to the FIA program. I come from elsewhere, and not everybody has a program like that. I can't tell you the important impact that has on the students of Pennsylvania, and we very much appreciate it, especially in these difficult times. I'll finish up, Mr. Chairman, and then we'll take questions at your discretion. We do currently have the same appropriation very closely to what we had in 1997, but we are serving today more than 13,000 additional students over 1997. As I say, when people say, how do you do that? Well, we're trying to find more creative, innovative efficiencies in how we do business to make sure that we can keep driving up those graduate numbers and that we can operate in a way that will serve not only our general population, but the students that we're going to have coming forward. I'll leave you with this. Our board has made a critical strategic decision that we are beginning to look over the next 6 months or so at a reorganizational and a modernization effort. What must this system look like for the next 25 years that we must keep from the past and that we must change for the future? And I am sure, because if we don't, we're wasting our time, we need to look at dynamic change for the future. I would also submit respectfully that if we're the only ones who do that, and it doesn't impact some of the other delivery systems, the state will be getting half a loaf. We're dedicated to it. My board has the courage to take it on because you know the emotional questions and answers that will be dealt with and some of the responses to any kind of a change, especially in higher ed. But if we don't do this, we're going to slide into irrelevancy for our students in the future. We can't allow that to happen. So we'll keep you apprised and seek your input as we go through this process in the many months to come, and also want to share it with other delivery systems, because I'll give you an example of that as I give way on this one. We have 14 state-owned universities scattered all over the Commonwealth. Penn State, which is a remarkable institution of higher education, also has 22 branch campuses scattered all over the Commonwealth. I believe, and I will take complete responsibility for this statement. I don't ascribe it to anybody else. I think we're missing the boat if we don't have a conversation in these days and times about how to reorganize what we do and what they do with those branch campuses to make sure that, if nothing else, we're all operating as efficiently as possible, providing access and affordability to the students of the Commonwealth. It's one example of how us just changing is probably not going to be the full answer to the issues of the future of higher ed in the state. So with that, Mr. Chairman and members, thanks for indulging me that, and we will be available for your questions.
Thank you, Chancellor. We will turn the mic over to our Standing Committee Chair, Senator Smucker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To begin, I think I missed the introduction. Do you have a student on the panel here? Do you want to introduce yourself again?
Yes, my name is Drew Johnson. Excuse me. My name is Drew Johnson. I am a senior communication studies major at East Stroudsburg University, and I serve as the student body president.
So give us just a few minutes about your experience there, and your experience with the system.
Okay. Well, where do we? Let's start with my family, I guess. My mom is a graduate of IUP. My brother is a graduate of East Stroudsburg University. He was a senior when I was a freshman. So he went to ESU on a full athletic scholarship, and given my stature at 6'7", that's kind of what people expected me to do too. Yeah. But I cut into a lane of my own. I think that student leadership and student government were my calling. Wonderful. So in my formative years at ESU, I served as a campus tour guide, and then I transferred over into orientation. So recruitment of new incoming students was really vital to me. And then I realized that the governing body who represents them sometimes, leaves out some of their voices. So let me, take that call to action, and I've been serving as student president for 2 academic years now, and I'll graduate in May 2016.
Wonderful. Well, appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm sure you'll do very well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chancellor, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Just a few questions. I just want to very briefly take off on one of the comments you made in regards to the Penn State branches. So I'm just curious, at some point we should potentially get that discussion moving, but what are some of your thoughts about how we would approach that discussion?
Yes, sir. Good question. Having worked with branch campuses before, I've come to this realization that unless the branch campus is so successful by way of enrollment and therefore revenue, the university is unable to provide the full university experience, meaning availability of ample faculty, of support services necessary, which is why many students sign up for higher education to begin with. And because it is virtually impossible to do that, you've always got to examine how you're organized. With 22 branch campuses, and by the way, a number of those incredibly successful, I might add, there also, I think, exists some opportunity where we have universities that are facing declining enrollment and know that right there in their shadow they might be 1 or 2 or 3 branch campuses of Penn State serving those students, to be able to work more closely aligned to see if there's a way to serve all of those students in a different model. It may not mean that the students who are working on a Penn State degree have to surrender that Penn State degree just because the model changes. It is possible to do both, but to better align campuses, better to align services and opportunities for student is what I'm suggesting. There are no magic numbers in terms of what a successful branch campus is, but I think, and again, I take full responsibility for these thoughts. I think it probably is time in the history, but more importantly, the future of the Commonwealth, to sit down and have a robust conversation about that. I also believe, on the flip side, that we all need to do a better job of creating a more seamless alignment with our community colleges. We've been working to try to do that in our system. We're getting ready to roll out some new programs that will give students opportunities for the future that they don't have right now between our community colleges and our 14 state-owned universities. But it isn't enough. We need to continue to work to make sure that, as is the case in a lot of states, there is a seamless opportunity for every community college student who wants to go on beyond that associate degree. And it should be cost-effective and tamp down redundancy and cost or credit generation. And when people say, oh, it'll never happen, it does happen, and it happens all over the country. If you put smart people in a room and figure out how to articulate your curriculum and how to create an economic pathway, it becomes a very cost-effective way for a community college student to chase a baccalaureate degree. And as it relates to us, we have a larger obligation, I believe, as do many across the country, to begin to get serious about the fact that there should be multiple start and stop points in a desire to get a baccalaureate degree, for example. That along the way, it is impossible to pick up a certificate in a particular area and make yourself immediately more marketable before you get that baccalaureate. Along the way, it is possible to secure majors and minors that will line up with what you're doing and make certain that you can see what the jobs are, what the salaries are, what the availability is, and make life and career decisions based on good information that should be made available to our students.
I'm glad you brought it up, and I do think it's time for a discussion. I know there's quite a variation between universities within the system. There are several that are struggling. Perhaps there are, and I know the system has been looking at that, but perhaps there are answers outside of the system in regards to, looking at it not just within the silo of the system, but otherwise. So I think it's probably a great time to start that discussion. So thank you. I look forward to working with you on that.
One of the populations I didn't discuss is the non-traditional. Yeah. You know, our universities used to flip on the lights and open the doors every fall, and we were full. Well, with the declining demographic that we're seeing in high school students coming out of our high schools around the state, which is going to last a while longer and will be years before it really starts to increase substantially, I think we not only have a chance, but I think we have an opportunity and maybe a responsibility to begin to reach out to those non-traditional students, that 35-year-old single mother with 2 children who needs a baccalaureate degree. We'll never get to that 60% mark in Pennsylvania unless we get very creative and unless we tamp down the barriers for people who want and now more than ever need that access.
And I think another area that perhaps the system could be part of is career and technical training. I'm hearing from business on a regular basis that there are not enough individuals to fill positions there. And they're looking for highly skilled individuals to fill jobs that pay well. And I think that could potentially be part of that discussion as well. So we'll talk more about that. I look forward to continue those discussions. Your increase proposal, your request was a 20% increase. You touched upon it a little in your opening remarks, but could you just expand and provide a little perspective, a little more perspective on the need for the 20% increase and what would your uses be for those dollars?
Yes, sir. Every October, of course, as we are required to do by legislation, our board engages in always a very robust conversation about the upcoming fiscal year as we put together our projections of both revenue and expenditures and determine what is going to be the need moving forward. This year, there was such a robust conversation. The senators were there and participated in that. There's no perfect science to this. There have been a variety of ways that this has been handled, not only in our system, but other systems over many years. This year, our board decided to bifurcate the request, not by way of expectation, but explanation. First of all, we have an approximate number, $41 million need for next year just to deal with the issue of rising cost in health care, pension, and general rate of inflation. as you've heard me say before, so I'll bore you again with it, when we get a number like that for the next year, we know there are only 3 ways to make that deficit up. It would be a deficit if it is not covered. But we know going in, we're going to have to cover it, so it won't be. You can increase tuition, and or you can receive more money in a state appropriation, and or you can cut your budget proportionally depending on how the first 2 are handled. And so part of the request is the $41 million to cover those costs. And going into our July meeting, which is where the board then is required to consider the issue of tuition, they will have to consider what other things look like. What does next year's appropriation look like? How might that be handled so that they can then make a better and more informed decision on the issue of tuition moving forward? So that is 41. There is an additional amount of money, $46.7 million for new investment. And this was based on conversation, not just at the board meeting on that day, but long and protracted conversations about what we are going to need to function as a 21st century system, even while we're making the efficiencies and the reductions necessary to deal with difficult economic times, and also the need to always try to find ways to be more efficient and more productive. And it breaks out this way. $29 million for new program alignment. There is a regular myth, and it's very understandable, that when we place a program, an academic program, into moratorium, meaning we take it off the books at an institution, the logical expectation is you take the money you used to spend on that program and put in a new program with it. The problem is almost across the board that when you take a program offline, you're largely doing it because it is undersubscribed and because you are usually, by the time you do that, taking money from other programs to subsidize its continued existence. So my point is, when you take it offline, there is no money in reality to move toward a higher cost, more expensive program, which are the programs we're adding. We have put about 150 programs into moratorium. We've reorganized others and are still doing that. And we have been putting new programs, approvals to the Board of Governors over time to add new programs that are typically STEM, allied health, engineering, high-cost programs.
I'm going to interrupt you
Yes,
if I may. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
But I have a limited amount of time. I wanted to bring up one additional item before we turn it over to others. I've been, of course, in regular touch with Millersville. Dr. Anderson is here. He's doing a great job in leadership at Millersville. Millersville is a great part of the Lancaster community, as is every other institution that's a part of the system. And I know that at Millersville, they've made a number of changes to drive out additional efficiencies and better use of dollars to respond to less dollars coming from as revenue. One of the things that I thought was very innovative and has worked out very well is the per credit tuition program. That really has resulted in additional revenue to the college or to the university, and it's somewhat of a pilot program, but to date the outcomes have been outstanding, have been satisfactory. There's been no negative impact on students. In fact, students seem to be better, more savvy consumers in the choices they're making in terms of the courses they're selecting and so on. And the pilot program has met all of its goals. And so I just wanted to get your thoughts on that to see whether the system will continue to be committed. I know that was approved by the system, of course, as you know. But I'd just like to hear your thoughts on progress on that so far.
For the members in general, the Board of Governors almost, I guess, 2 years ago now, time flies, made a determination to consider, and if they believed appropriate, allow a university to engage in what we call price pointing. Price pointing may be lowering the cost of tuition to a veteran. It may be lowering out-of-state costs marginally for out-of-state students to try to compete with enrollment from other other states, New York, New Jersey, Ohio in the western side, et cetera. It may be increasing the cost for a doctoral degree in nursing because of the significant costs associated with that program to try to reclaim more of the real cost of offering that program. Or, to the Senator's point, it could be a wholesale change at a university, moving from what we have done traditionally, which is a general cost for the courses that people take, same for everybody, and move toward what's called cost per credit. Probably about half the universities and colleges in the country use that methodology. The other half probably more of what we have traditionally done. And what it does is, instead of this sort of all-you-care-to-eat buffet, where in many cases the part-time students are subsidizing the students taking 15, 18 credit hours, you are paying by the credit. Now, some people say, well, that means if you take more credits, you'll pay more money. Yeah, that's true. But it also means if you're taking more credits, you're going to graduate faster than somebody who isn't, so you're going to avoid the back-end costs that are associated with a protracted experience. And because of that, Millersville was the first in, and they marketed this. They are now in their second year of implementation. And as you mentioned, Senator, all of these price points have to come back before the board every year for reconsideration. We call them pilots. Reconsideration to look for disadvantages they may have created unintentionally to the institution, advantages they may have created, or does there seem to be just a general net acceptance of the new program without any great impact one or the other. Why do we do that? Because higher ed is not notorious for trying new things. Higher ed is notorious for putting new things in place and never looking back. If this doesn't work, and the statistics bear that out, we can stop that practice. If enrollments go down because of it, if there's a negative impact on retention or graduation rates tracked to it, we have the ability to stop it. If it needs to be tweaked, we have the ability to reorganize it, but it has to be reviewed on that side every single year to make sure that it is still satisfactory. We did that the first time with about 20 of our price point programs, and even though they'd only been in place for a short time, we've only started this about 18 months ago or 2 years ago, that one in particular was the first out, and we found that it was having either no impact, negative, or positive impact in some of the issues that we reviewed, so they will be continuing that in the fall.
Right.
Does that help?
Great, it does. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Smucker. Senator Dinniman.
Yes, hello, panel.
Senator.
And I will thank you. Thank you, Senator Schwenk. And we're delighted that Senator Alloway and Senator Schwenk are on our board, on your board, and they're two outstanding people. I want to use a comment that Senator Wagner had used earlier today and try to get at something. Senator Wagner, I think, quite correctly said, how much we need to know how much money is in the bank before giving more money. So could you tell us, as of today, what your reserves are?
Our reserves at probably, I'm going to take a swag at this, Senator, not to be disrespectful, but it's a moving target because they change
but as
day
of
to day.
today, approximately.
We're probably $650 million total reserves, operational reserves in the system today.
Now, what is the reserves in the Chancellor's office, in the central part? Now, because individual campuses vary from almost nothing to a great deal.
Sure.
So you're telling me is $650 million in the system as a whole that are reserves that include all the campuses. What is it in the central administration, the Chancellor's office?
What's our reserve? We'll get it for you. Before we're finished here, we'll get it for you.
I appreciate that. The question is, has there not been some discussion of and in the board about taking reserves of other of the individual 14 universities and sweeping them together? Is that being discussed, and if so, what is the current status of that discussion?
Well, we discussed everything, but in that regard, let's go back and talk about what makes an operational reserve. An operational reserve means that those are dollars that the university has consciously decided will be placed into a reserve account. They are banked against needs in the area of unfunded liability, for example. There's been the change in terms of what we are now required to bank and show for unfunded liability. It, as you might imagine, wouldn't surprise anybody, has taken on our unfunded liability requirements to a skyrocketing total. It's always been there, but now we're required to bank it. So many of our universities are showing much greater numbers in their reserves in terms of set aside to cover against unfunded liabilities.
Then what happens to the universities, say as a Cheney, which is incapable at this point because of student enrollment is now down to about 700, and graduate enrollment I think is only 5 or 6. So how do they have reserves against the unfunded liabilities, and who covers that?
They don't have any reserves against unfunded liabilities, and therefore the system, which in this case is defined as the other 13 universities, have to cover their unfunded liabilities, because that is, while unfunded, still absolutely essential to cover if and when you have to do so. So the system, which means the appropriation we receive from you that is divided 14 ways among the universities, has to be the bank in that regard to cover against it, which makes another case in terms of the fact that in some ways we already are looking at other people's money, not only to cover operational cost at a Cheney, and looking at other universities which may be falling into exactly the same situation in the near future. But we also have to give the other universities the chance to bank against those unfunded liabilities because they can. Also, our reserves are used because their non-recurring revenue can be used for deferred maintenance to help offset deferred maintenance needs at the institution, because they are one-time monies in the reserve account that can bank against deferred maintenance issues and the like.
So in essence, the reason I asked the question is, then we start with the knowledge, as we approach this budget, that there's $650 million in reserves. And I believe Senator Wagner was the reason he was asking this question related to the state related. So we start there. And it means that universities that might have, perhaps are spending well, spending more in a more planning way, or because of enrollment are able to do that, that what they save and put in reserve ultimately will be taken. So what's the reward then for a university in that sense?
Well, the reward is knowing it's there and knowing that it's called for. The one mythology is that if somebody has a reserve account, that it is a Christmas Club account that sits there without any particular importance by way of individual issues. There's not a president in the system who can't point to their reserve accounts and tell you exactly where that money is dedicated to go, and that's why they banked it there in reserve accounts. It's a little like our own homes. When we put money set aside, we know why we're doing that.
But how can this continue to survive if you have universities which do not have the enrollment, which do not have the ability to take care of themselves, nevertheless put money in reserve?
That's exactly why we're having the conversation beginning effective immediately about reorganization and modernization. You can't. And the question is, should you? Because markets change, needs change, higher education changes, and that might mean necessary change in our system. What that change will look like by way of recommendations, it's too early to tell, but I do know this. We cannot continue to function the way we are functioning as a 14-state university system with all of the issues that we are dealing with, and that includes the very dramatically changing face of higher education in the country. There are states all over the country, I talk to them, who are going through variations on this theme, who are making dramatic change. I'll give you Georgia. Georgia has 30...
With all deference, Mr.
You've heard enough?
Chancellor,
Thank you, sir.
We understand what the problem is in higher education nationally. What you've helped us understand is, and if I want to make sure I understand what you're saying, is that the state system as presently structured cannot continue to exist. That by exist, I mean continue its same model. That we can even start with the fact that a number of our universities don't even have the appropriate reserves that are required legally and otherwise, and thus we borrow from other universities to do this. So that when we approach the question of the budget, it means The difficulty is, what does a 20% increase or in the budget mean? Our budget increase has to go hand in hand with whatever plan you present. So when do you propose, as we work on this coming year's budget, to let us know what you're doing? Because you have a different plan. I mean, the amount of money and what reserves mean and everything else, how much is in the bank, how much we put additional in the bank, is going to have to be coordinated with your plan. So when do you hope to share that with us?
As I say, we're probably 6 months away. You're talking about a mammoth undertaking in order to come back with a reorganizational plan for a system that in many ways is 175 years of age and has statewide implications. So there's an urgency to do it, Senator, and not to drag our feet. Higher ed also is very capable of dragging its feet for a prolonged period of time. We want to expedite this. We need to expedite this, not only because of the urgency to make sure we're organized for the next 25 years for the student, but also that as it relates to how we spend our money, how we operate, that we can do it in a time that's very difficult, which creates an urgency to get it done and figure out how we move forward.
No, we appreciate all that. It's that when we approach this budget cycle with the system intact, and in the way it's modeled, because we do not know what the plan is until we get to the 17-18 cycle. Just so I understand, it's the reason I'm asking the question. One area, if I may, that last year we spoke about, but is still presenting a serious problem to a number of universities, is this matter of DGS. And in fact, we went through this question, I think with Senator Eichelberger, who asked it earlier about the state-related, or one of the senators asked about DGS. Was it with you? Now, in our discussions over the last 2 years as Chancellor, as you know, starting with Senator Mary Jo White and myself, and Mary Jo had Clarion and she had Slippery Rock, we were trying to get a situation where those universities that were capable would hire their own architects and do the work. Right. We had legislation in order to take that. We recognized that some smaller universities couldn't do that. Because we haven't really been able to move, and it could be as much the administration as it is the state system on this, you have a situation at my university, at Westchester University, where a whole building is now stopped because work wasn't going done under the DGS architect, and they have to hire a new architect, which throws everything out of kilter in terms of where the classrooms are going to be and what we can do with the opening of years. I'm sure that experience is another one of our state system schools as well. So what progress, and we left it, that you would negotiate this with the Secretary of DGS, and in fact, the bill was giving you the power to determine which institution. We stopped the bill because we said you were going to negotiate this out with DGS. Where are we on this? Because first of all, most of the bills, a lot of these buildings aren't even being paid by the state anymore, as you well know. They're being paid by the foundation or money that's raised for donors. So where are we on this issue?
I met with the new secretary of DGS 3 months ago, I suppose, and with members of my staff and members of his staff. At our joint request, we had gotten together during the SECA campaign. I was the chairman of this year's State Employee Charitable Campaign, and I went to meet with him in that regard. We began a conversation about that. That conversation turned into a meeting regarding how DGS organizes around this. I found the secretary to be incredibly open to the idea, he and his staff, of taking a different approach to how we determine whether DGS will organize a construction project at a university or whether the university will take on that responsibility. And his staff and mine are continuing to meet to see how we might reorganize that effort. He believes that there could be greater efficiency. I'm not speaking for him, but that was the conversation.
Well, we did it. In the Randall
efficiency.
administration, the universities had that privilege. Then it was taken away for whatever reason in the last administration. But I would like to see us move on this. I spoke to him about it when he first came into office, and he was receptive. We're now a year later. But the point is that for universities to have to pay the additional architectural fee to be, who gets the job and who doesn't get the job, DGS, when it could get it at a lower price, save significant amounts of money, and get the job done much quicker, and when such a large share of these buildings are no longer state money, but they're money that each university itself raises, I think we need to move forward on. I'm glad that you started discussions. I just encourage you to complete the discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chancellor.
Senator Dinniman, to members, 5 minutes, questions and comments. Chancellor, so our members have an opportunity to ask multiple questions in their time, to keep your answers as brief as possible.
Yes, sir.
That would be appreciated. Senator Scavello, followed by Senator Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, Chancellor. And first, I want to just make a comment about Drew there. He's from East Stroudsburg University, and if all students that come out of our universities turn out like Drew, we're going to have a great country.
Thank you.
I really mean that with all sincerity. And Drew, I'd love to give all the credit to university, but you got great parents. When a young man quotes his dad in the conversation, he gave me a firm handshake, and he looked me right in the eye, and he says, "My dad always told me," he says, "firm handshake, let them remember you shook their hand, and always talk to them directly." And I'll never forget that, the fact that, that your dad made that impression on you, because he's so right. He is so right. When you give somebody a handshake, look at them. And but I see you in the involved in the school, and that's so important. Now, I'm going to ask you, and I know money would be the first thing somebody would say, but what would you say? In your experience at the university, what would you like to see different? What would you like to see us maybe look at that we haven't done?
I'd say over my 4 years here, at least from the academic side of things, due to declining financial support, I've seen professional tutors be cut.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen upper class students have then stepped up to be gurus, or those mentors for larger pools of students who have general education courses that they don't typically see themselves in.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy hearing about this per credit opportunity that's happening at other universities, because those humanities students want to stay away from biology if they can. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
So when you're in that guru session, it's kind of difficult to get that in-depth opportunity. So definitely professional tutors. I think I'd love to see that come back full in a fuller force at ESU. From the student engagement side of things, I think it's kind of just a culture shift and maybe like a mindset. I don't think it comes from the Capitol or really anyone, but I think more people need to take a bigger stake in retention of students. People like to, at least in the conversations that I've either been a part of or have heard, it typically falls into the laps of admissions. Admissions needs to find a way to keep our students here. And from the recruitment side of things, I've been the face of the university for incoming students, and it's not just an admissions issue that deters students from or keeps students from finishing out their academic career. So I just would like that culture shift. I don't know how we do it, but I'm a campaign kind of guy, from political science and communication. So grassroots of some sorts to get people to know this is an all or nothing. I think everyone needs to have a better stake at keeping students at our universities and getting them out in 4 years. So yeah.
I tell my two daughters, you're on the 4-year plan. Said, "Dad, what is that?" I says, "The first 4 I take care of. Anything after that, you're going to pay for." They went on the 4-year plan.
Verbatim. That's what my mother did for us too. We got 4. So.
Okay, thank you, Drew, and I wish you the very best.
Thank you,
Chancellor.
Yes, sir.
My background is supermarkets, so I have to say, why would I talk about supermarkets and talk about universities? But I've got 10 supermarkets doing very well in this one company. We open up another one, and that supermarket is really hurting. It's drawing down the other 10. So what ends up happening, in order to make up for the loss, what I have to do in the other supermarkets is raise prices. So when I raise prices, I start losing sales. And now I'm going to turn it over into the state system. If I have 1 or 2 that are really hurting, and that I've got to take dollars out of the other and put into those schools, and in some cases raise tuitions in the other schools. At some point, what's going to happen, we're going to have a hard time bringing students into those schools. And so, are you looking at some of these schools? Like I saw one here, 700 students. The graduating class in my daughter's high school was 700. I just can't for the life of me figure how in the world that school is going to be able to survive. And I know if I was that school was in my area, I'd probably be saying the same thing. You know, I just want you to know, honestly, if you can answer that.
You have put your finger on the hardest part of what we're about to engage in, which is not the dollars and cents or enrollments or academic programs, but it is the emotionalism, the history, and the politics surrounding any kind of a significant change at a university. And you are right, we run the gambit in our 14. We have one university that is no longer able to meet its own operational obligations because of declining enrollment, and we are subsidizing that university's operation with money from the other 13. That's the other myth. The system doesn't have any operational budgets beyond that which we use to operate our system offices. When we say the system money, that is the money that you appropriate to the state university system that is distributed through an allocation formula to those 14 state universities. And to subsidize the first, and then I'll be specific about what I mean by first, we allocate that money out through a very specific formula that has to do with not only enrollment, but has to do with a centralized hub that came through the new allocation formula that was created that makes certain that every university receives a minimum of $8.1 million to operate central services that every university needs to have, and then adds enrollment and other factors to the mix. So once that money is distributed, it is swept on a monthly basis, put into an interest-bearing account to try to generate a little extra money for the system before it is redistributed with a little extra hopefully attached to it. That is the account from which we draw to subsidize the first university. For the first time in the history of our system, it is one university, and we are headed toward more. We have right now universities that are eating through their operational reserves and are going to run out of operational money within the next year to 2 years. And the bigger question than the one we're already facing is, can a system survive by doubling or tripling down on the same concept of taking money from other universities to subsidize others without throwing other universities? A good example that I use is Lock Haven University. I don't know if anybody up there serves the Lock Haven area, but it's a smaller university, but they have a very, very strong business model. But they will tell you, they are working on the thinnest of margins. A good wind would blow them over. And by virtue of that fact, if you go to them repeatedly and say, we're going to take more of your money and pass it on to others, they now get in line because they're forced to with the universities who may be in line. And that's what this board has recognized, and recognized we cannot continue to do that. As great as all these universities are and their long illustrious histories, it won't work anymore. It will break down and implode on itself. That's why this massive reorganizational look that we're going to have.
Thank you.
To go back to that supermarket scenario, how it turned out was they ended up closing that store and 2 others because they lost a tremendous amount of volume because of the increase in retails. And you're pretty much describing that at the state system. I think that is something that you need to look at, because personally I think that we could probably reduce tuitions in the other schools if possible, because those extra dollars would be going there. Now, this is one question that we've asked all the secretaries.
Last question, Senator, please.
We've asked all the secretaries. Thank you. And the question is, what within your system? We've cut back. Many of these secretaries have that their staffing, not but at your end. They've all claimed that they've cut back numerous employees to reduce their overhead so that those dollars can go elsewhere.
Yes, sir.
And so that'd be another way of actually putting more money into the. Could you tell us what, if anything, or if you're looking at that as well?
Sir, Senator, first of all, I'll tell you that our entire system is 900 employees less now than we were 8 years ago across the board. Second, as we examine the business functions of all 14 universities, I'll be the first one to tell you that we repeat 14 times many of those business functions because each institution is its own entity. The problem is you end up with massive redundancy where you might be able to, and we're doing more of that now, have consortium within the system built so that people are sharing IT services or procurement services. We've talked about travel, trying to procure the services of one travel agency versus having 14 travel agencies. I know that might sound silly, but there's tremendous savings potential.
How about at your end, up here at Harrisburg, under your, have you cut back there as well?
We are, and we have to, because of course we're a function with the 0.5% of the whole system. As the system budget shrinks, our budget shrinks, and we have gone from 5 vice chancellors down to 2. We're trimming our organization at the same time. We have to do that.
Because that money would
but we
immediately
have to
goes
do
back.
that
Thank
too.
you so much.
Thank you, Senator Scavella. Senator Blake, followed by Senator Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chancellor. Appreciate you and your team being here, and particularly appreciate Drew Johnson being here from East Stroudsburg. I had a chance to, this year, the privilege to serve as Legislative Fellow for ESU, and Dr. Welsh was kind enough to invite me to a commencement at ESU, which is quite remarkable. But Drew, I appreciate your commentary here today. It's very, very helpful. I want to, and forgive me, Chancellor, because you may have talked about this in your opening remarks, and I'm not asking you to repeat yourself, but maybe some clarification. Workforce development, big issue for me, big issue for us. The things that we do to create a more efficient transition from school to work, and some of the things that you've talked about today, I think have hit on that. When we met personally, you talked about cataloging the degree programs. I think you mentioned this idea of connecting what I would call high demand occupations within various geographies of the state. Is that an ongoing process? Where are you with your cataloging, and how far away are we?
It's two-part. One is to create an inventory of what the jobs are in the state and what our degrees are, how our degrees are matching the requirements to get those jobs in the state. The other part of it is to then bring that together and review what we do at each of our universities to make sure that with our existing programs, and then very, very importantly, any new programs that are coming online, that there is a need before a new program, that's evidenced before a new program is brought online. We call it the supply-demand gap analysis, and we're just some months away from being able to share that with people. We've done a great body of work over the last year on that. As I mentioned in my preamble, it will also be very important, I think, for all of higher ed to look at this because it has the same application potential for everybody in higher ed to review that need and post it up against what we're all contributing to the baccalaureates, master's degrees, PhDs, et cetera.
Very good, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'll look forward to that data and the utility that it will provide in decision making. And again, I assume this is part of a larger sense of urgency you have. Your most recent remarks with Senator Scavella are the first time I heard affirmative remarks about the restructuring. There are opportunities, it seems to me, that you can find relative to back office operations or the consolidation of certain service or procurement provisions that could save money, and I do welcome what your analysis provides there. The other issue was brought up by Drew. What explains most the lack of completion, or do we know? Is it financial? Or is it larger than that?
It's one of those all of the aboves. It depends on the student, and it could be financial because a student has to stop out to get a job or keep a job so they can come back and pay. It could be job related because their job requires them to take less credit hours because they're working a great deal to help subsidize their education. It could be family issues. It could be a wide variety, and what our folks at the university level do, and I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'm gonna toss to Dr. Driscoll because they deal with this every day at IUP.
Sure.
But I'll just emphasize that when we look at the data for students who stop out, drop out, there are a couple of primary causes, but the number one is going to be financial issues. And the Chancellor has mentioned a number of the possible causes of that. Some of them stop out and come back after they've been able to recover. But that's probably number one. We certainly have issues to address, as Drew mentioned, in terms of providing better, more effective support at those crisis moments academically for a student. So I'd put that at the second point, that we are all doing better, but one of the areas we've cut over the last number of years has been in those support staff, and Drew highlighted that from his experience very well. We're trying to apply technology in those areas to reach out to students to not let them get in trouble. There are some opportunities now for more efficient ways to do that for large populations than there were just a few years ago. But in our tight financial times, finding the capital to reinvest in those new ways of doing that student support function very critical. But those are the two, I think.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the explanation. I think early intervention and planning across a horizon to avoid that is going to be essential, and that's important. I have a little more time here. I wanted to ask the capital needs. And this is a larger discussion about budget, but I know that you had deferred maintenance. There's some money coming out of the Keystone Fund, some $17 million to help on picking up on some of the deferred maintenance. Could you talk about what you know in that space?
I sure can, and I'll do a quick commercial message on this like I did on FIA. Keep doing Key 93. I'm not sure even the people in our system know what a good program that is, to have that rather predictable funding for deferred maintenance costs and other costs associated with things beyond just the regular budget. So I laud Pennsylvania for having the foresight to create a program like that. This year, we spent $13 million out of Key 93 money on deferred maintenance, but the universities subsidize that out of their university operating budgets for deferred maintenance to the tune of about $37 million. That could have come from operational, it could have come from reserves. So together, trying to meet the baseline needs of deferred maintenance. We spent $35 million, well, let me qualify that. We have spent $35 million out of capital appropriations money out of a pot provided by the General Assembly for $65 million. Why not all of it? Because projects get done in phases, and because thus far some of these projects we have paid for phase by phase. We still have that $65 million, out of the $65 million, the other half, after $35 million, is set aside to finish those phase projects. But those dollars are critical to us and very, very much appreciated.
Thank you, Chancellor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Before I go on, just one brief request. A couple times with members, the issue of reserves came up.
Yes, sir.
And you had responded with the fact that we have to be cognizant of encumbrances against those reserves. When you provide that information, could you make sure that there's detail about those encumbrances and things that aren't encumbered, so we are able to detail what may be potentially available for other allocations?
Absolutely.
Thank
yes,
you.
sir. And we'll get that to your office for distribution to the members.
Thank you. Senator Baker, followed by Senator Alloway.
Thank you. Welcome. I'm a proud system graduate, a Shippensburg graduate. I often say my son's a Kutztown graduate, and I too was an ESU legislative fellow, so have a great link to the system and have been very proud to have been part of it. And as we look at the operational costs of the system, I'd like to ask you to define out for all of us, so I can better understand what is tuition-based, what is raised through private foundation and grant support through the system, and what is coming from the state, because obviously you are offering funds from other sources. So if you could provide, if you don't have that with you today, I would ask that you share that with the Chancellor, or Chancellor, if you would share that with the Chair, just to get a better sense of how much are we raising, are you raising privately to match and supplant funding for the system? Yeah,
it's a great question, and I can do most of that, I think. On the appropriation side, of course, you all provide to us annually currently $412 million in the appropriation that we receive. That makes up about 25 to 26% of the full cost. The majority of the rest of that full cost is borne by students in tuition and fees, which now make up about 75% of that full cost. And then on top of those two sources of revenue, which are our largest sources of revenue, are private and philanthropic fundraising opportunities. Lois tells me that between $45 and $50 million annually in private fundraising spread across our 14 universities. Does that help?
Yes, that's terrific. As I looked at the budget materials, your request includes a significant amount for pension and health care as a fixed cost of your operations. And I'm just curious in terms of what the pension obligation will be. Do most of your employees, are they part of the state system? Are they part of TIAA CREF? And my other question is related to health care. Do your employees participate and pay a proportional share of their health care? And is that an area that potentially we could be looking at to have cost savings?
Senator, it breaks down this way. We are, for next year, we're looking at about a 4% health care increase. Now, I'll be the first one to admit those are flexible because sometimes this year was a good example. We underprojected the increase that we ultimately have faced in the area of health care. So it increased our overall deficit. But right now we're projecting a 4% increase. That's about $8.2 million, unless it changes. On the retirement side, first the bigger answer, we have a trifurcated system of retirement in our system. We have about 50% of our employees who are part of a TIAA CREF sort of contribution program. They are supported in statute by about a 9% contribution from the Commonwealth to that end. That makes up about 50% of our employees. The other 50% largely and almost exclusively, because one of those remaining three is shrinking year by year, but PSERS is now at
8%.
8%. It is the smallest of the three, and it is shrinking on an annual basis. SERS is now combined with the other 50%. Those two make up the lion's share of all of our employees. So, of course, as you might imagine, we're watching and we're participating in the conversations about pension reform and what it might look like. But I can tell you, a full 50% of our folks are in a contributory mode as far as their pension are concerned in the system.
Just one final question to follow up. The state will be putting a new plan together for the WIOA, the workforce changes at the federal level, and our state strategy is looking to recognize post-secondary education at a greater level as we move forward, whether it's micro-credentials, whether it's certificates, whether it's associates or postdoctorate. How do you see the system being part of driving that out so that we have the workforce of the future that will be more agile and meeting the industry-recognized demand jobs that will be helping our people have family living wages?
We very much need to increase our look at issues like experiential learning with someone who comes to matriculate but brings with them sizable experience in the real world and how we can afford credit to that. That's sweeping the nation. We need to do much more in that regard. Second, certificates. Certificates are a growing part of virtually all universities and colleges across the country. I'm generalizing to a degree, but not much. The idea that somebody can pick up on their way to a baccalaureate a credential with a certificate or even two and make themselves more marketable. We're doing some of that. We need to increase our look at that. So that including online education, and this system desperately needs to look at our online education, not the individual offerings as much as how we offer online education in what I believe needs to be a much more organized and efficient manner than we do, while still maintaining the integrity of the faculty, the curriculum, the assessments, and the quality of work that comes out of the pipe. So while we're trying to look at the traditional ideas for change, there's also even some of those new ideas. I'm old enough to remember when there was no online education, so it's still new in many ways, but we don't have it right yet. We need to continue to evolve as that technology evolves and our place with it evolves.
Thank you, Senator Alloway, followed by Senator Schwank.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, thank you for the opportunity to come here and speak to you. I've been on the PASSCUF Board of Governors now for, I guess, 3 or 4 years. And when I first got on the board, I didn't know very much about the operation, and I kind of sat there and listened. And quite frankly, I think I've done that pretty much all along, kept my mouth shut, and maybe not so much the last meeting. But I just want to say to the members of this committee and all my colleagues, I do believe that the central office does an excellent job at managing the budget and managing the system. I do believe that we have presidents that do an excellent job at managing their schools. But we need to have a serious conversation, and it was been touched on here many times, and we danced around the issue. Senator Scavella put a very nice example forward, and I'm not as polished as the rest of my colleagues, so this conversation may become a little unpleasant for some people. But let's take a look at this system, okay? This system is a communist-style system. And Frank, stop me when I'm wrong. You interject here. I want to have a dialogue with you. Okay, this system is designed to be one unit, right? One unit. And the motto is, from each according to each according. That's the motto, right? That's how it is. So what I found a little shocking through many of these dialogues with some of my colleagues is when they become indignant about the fact that money is taken by the central office from a school that has, and given to a school that doesn't have. It blows my mind, because I think, what do you think a socialist style philosophy is? That's what it is, okay? Let's just, look, we can agree or disagree whether it's good or bad, but that's what it is, okay? We take from one, we give another. Maybe about 2 years ago, I was summoned to a meeting with the APSCUF professors at Shippensburg University. And they sat there and they were just indignant that how dare the central office take money from them to prop up other universities. And I looked them dead in the face and I said, but isn't that what your philosophy calls for? Boy, you should have seen them. They got real huffy with me after that. But this is the truth, okay? So let's not kid ourselves. Okay, we're not going to shut down universities, right? We're not going to shut down Mansfield. We're not going to shut down Clarion and these struggling universities. Okay, we're not going to do that. So what are we going to do? We need to get serious about what we're going to do. And I know that's what you've been saying about this whole meeting. We have to talk about what we're going to do. And I don't know what the answer is, but the market calls for a shift. Just as Senator Scavella very aptly put, when one of the markets is going down, and here's the other thing too, resentment grows between the universities from the haves and the have-nots. That's just the reality of it, okay? So we have to have a serious conversation about what we're going to do. This system is awesome. I'm a product of this system. I love the state system. I think they put out incredible value at education. I really believe that. I look around and I see the costs of other universities, and you guys do a fabulous job. But it cannot continue, and we can't sit here as senators and pretend that this system is going to work, because we can't continue taking from Westchester and Shipp and Millersville to prop up these other programs, okay? That's the one thing. The second thing is, you've talked about it again, doing what the market demands, changing these programs, shelving some of them, starting new programs. Okay, that all sounds great, but we know on the board the fight we're going to have ahead of us. With who? With the union, of course, because every time you try and change the system, the union steps in and says, oh no, you can't do that. You can't shelve that program because that's a professor's job. Okay, well then we need to move the program from this university to here where it can be viable. Oh, we can't do that. Okay, then what are we going to do? I mean, these are the realities that the members of this committee need to understand, that this is what we're facing, okay? So Also in that meeting at Shippensburg University, I had this one old dinosaur of a professor just sit there and rail on online learning, how awful it was, and you didn't get the college experience. And I'm sitting there going, I looked at him and I said, sir, you're going to be run over and left in the past. Of course, he didn't like that either. But that's the reality. The world has changed. And we have to change with it. And we need to untie your hands and the hands of these presidents to be able to change with the market with what the consumers want. I mean, the union fought us on this per credit thing. Why? We're trying to make the system strong so it can serve everybody, and yet we get pushed back and fought at every turn. Well, that's someone's job. We can't end that program. Well, tough crap. So I want to have a serious dialogue. I care about this system. That's why I asked to be on this system's board, because I want to see the system be strong, and I want to see it serve people. It provides a great value, and I want to see it continue well into the future. Thank you for what all of you guys have done to continue to push this ball forward. I'll be a voice for you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Would you like to respond? Briefly, please.
First of all,
That's just my opinion.
well, I will respond this way, Mr. Chairman, because I think it's important I do. As we take this new look at the system, everything has to be on the table. If we start this process by first determining what are the sacred cows, what are the traditions that cannot be changed, what are the rules and regulations that keep us from making changes that have to be preserved moving forward, you still won't be able to change a damn light bulb in this system without asking somebody special permission to do so. I am convinced we've got to unshackle these people. We've got to let them organize their universities in a way to serve their student population and free them up of many of the obligations that they have been bound to for 40 years that are not only not taking us forward anymore, they are holding us back and in some cases driving us down. Everything has got to be on the table or this will be an exercise in complete futility. What would we want from you all? We need you to be partners. We're going to be going through a very emotional set of conversations. We're going to be going through a very political set of conversations, unintentionally, but it's unavoidable. We're going to need advocates who are willing to stand up and say, if it is the best interest of the system and ultimately the students who will be served by this system, then we've got to put that emotionalism and that politic aside and do what's right. We've all got to be singing off of that page. As I was in a meeting the other day, and I'll stop, I was in a meeting with some Council of Trustee members, and when we presented their budget, they said, gee, do we really need 14 universities in this system? Now, I know over their head was a little white bubble that said, well, I know we need ours, but do we need those 13 as members of our system? And that would be replayed 13 other times. Everything has to be on the table, and people need to be ready to have adult conversation about where this system goes, or we will all be wasting our time. And we'll be having those conversations. We will involve people in those conversations. We'll be looking at best practice around the country. As I mentioned, Georgia right now is merged. They have 34 state universities in Georgia, Mr. Chairman. They are merging 2 of them every 18 months. They have a process and a practice they've put in place, and they are merging 2 campuses, 2 universities into one every 18 months, and they'll do another 2 coming up very soon. I'm not suggesting that's the way they're doing it, and that, can you imagine the guts? 2 sets of school colors become 1 set of school colors. 2 mascots become 1 mascot. Unless it's puppy, monkey, baby, you're going to have to find a creative way to get people to satisfy the emotionalism of moving from a badger to a wolverine. I'm being silly to make a point. Yeah. These are emotional and political issues, but for the not just the survival, but for the flourishing of our universities, we've got to engage in those sorts of conversation, and everything has to be on the table to do that.
Thank you. Obviously, your primary charge is education and investing in our young people, but change is hard, and communities are dependent on institutions. Anytime you make change, people are affected. So we can't underestimate the challenge of doing this, but candor and honesty is necessary, and that's why these conversations are important. Senator Schwenk.
Thank you, and good afternoon. Good to see the whole team here from the board and our presidents as well and our student. Chancellor, I'm with you all the way. But I will remind all of us, not just you, that everybody has to be part of the conversation. And we can rail against certain entities or groups, but they've got to be part of this because they are a key factor in making sure that our students get the education that they need. And we do need to understand that each institution has some sort of cultural atmosphere to it, or I don't, that's not exactly the right term that I want to put to it, but you look at a Cheney, you look at a Millersville, or you look at, for example, Kutztown. They are vital parts of our community. They are great economic contributors, but they're also a part of the institution too. So those entities also have to be involved in this conversation as well. Let's get started. Let's stop talking and get started. And I will remind you too that we had the opportunity not too long ago, for example, to appoint a retired professor to the Board of Governors. And that didn't happen for whatever reason. And I was disappointed in that because I think there's some expertise there that we are perhaps not bringing. We don't always want to hear everything that people bring to us, but that's going to be part of this process too. So I do want to remind everybody that that's the case as well. But, Drew, I really want to direct my remarks to you because I just said that Kutztown, or I don't think I said it, but Kutztown University is in my district. So I represent them, and I'm there an awful lot. And I've known at least 3 of the student presidents, and I know they're incredible individuals, and I have a feeling just by what you've said recently that you're one of them as well. And you've got your finger on the pulse of what students are talking about. So talk to me, because recently we've had some votes where we've had to increase tuition. We've made those. I wasn't happy about it, but that's what happened. What are students telling you about how this is impacting them?
From my perspective, the conversations don't lead down the path of how expensive tuition is, but more so, I qualify for support, and the support that I am told that I'm entitled to isn't coming to me.
You mean the FIA grants?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. The FIA grants. So, in our conversation with the representatives, I just had to make mention that students now are we have to reprioritize things. We are juggling whether or not we want to buy this book during syllabus week when I have 2 chapters due next week, or do I want to pay my rent for this month because it's March 2nd and I'm a day behind, because the funding that comes in that we've applied for and have been told that we're qualified to get, that hinges on a lot. It hinges on a meal plan that you get. It hinges on whether or not I'm going to go to Walmart or if I'm going to go to you know what I mean. It fosters a lot of frustration and a lot of concern for students. It keeps many from coming back. At ESU, we've had our highest amount of our highest freshman class in our entire school's history this past fall, and I had the opportunity to be their orientation leader and foster relationships with more students this time around. Many of those students haven't come back this semester. And I would like to say that a high percentage, even though I don't know many of them, as President Driscoll had mentioned, are financial reasons. And I don't think that I can't say that it's all about FIA or if it's all about tuition costs rising, but I do know that our pockets are being hit. And many of us are first-generation students, not myself, I can't even say me, but many students are first-generation students. They don't have family support to even tell them how to navigate or how to do it. And then when our universities lack the support systems outside of the classroom to educate us on the fact that your 2.5 GPA directly reflects how much financial aid you're gonna get, and if you don't make that benchmark, you're not coming back, it gets really difficult.
To you and also to our college president there, are we being very clear to students about, right from the beginning, kind of like when you buy a vehicle, you know the manufacturer's price, you know what you're going to pay, you know the tax and the tags and everything else that's going to be, this, are we making sure that students understand what they are signing up for? You both can answer that.
Yeah, I mean, as a student leader, I'd say we are trained, we are very trained from various departments on campus to just be sources of information. You know, if I don't know the answer, I can get the answer for you and point you in the right direction. So I think my campus specifically does a wonderful job at getting our student leaders educated to be those support systems for incoming students. But I think that doubling up on that information is necessary. So summer orientation happens in August, July. I'm telling an 18-year-old freshman who's excited after graduating high school so much about financial aid, they couldn't care less. This is very valuable information, but you know, it doesn't really mean much to them or resonate with them until you know, it's December, and I don't know if I'm coming back to school or not. So I think that our universities, we do a good job at giving us the information, but follow-up, I think, could be improved. Yeah.
And I'll just enhance that slightly. Yes, we tell students and their parents the implications of the costs in front of them, the structure, what a loan means. But I agree with Drew that we need to tell them more frequently and at specific moments of need, if you will, as opposed to just once.
Can I interrupt you? Thank you. Just one quick question, because I see my light is red. How many of your students are first-generation college students? Is that a factor there as well?
It certainly is, as families come to that. We looked at the number recently. About 30+% of our students are first generation. Some of my colleagues would say they have higher percentages than that. But of course, if you haven't navigated the higher ed mechanics before, it's much more challenging. And again, another place where we need to make sure we're doing even more than we are now.
Another thing we need to work on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Schwank. Senator Vogel, followed by Senator Rafferty.
Good afternoon, Chancellor, and afternoon, staff. Good to see you this afternoon. This is all a very good conversation we're having. I'm glad we're having it. Unfortunately, it's painful to have, but Penn State and Pitt were sort of kind of having the same conversation with us this morning as far as downsizing, what do we keep and what do we get rid of and stuff like that. So obviously it's affecting everyone, but we need to have the conversation because the whole educational system in the state of Pennsylvania is going to depend on it at some point in time. So I'm glad we're having that conversation. But on to another issue. Do you measure the number of students who become employed in the fields that they study in? Do you have any metrics or any kind of information at all? Like if I'm an engineering student or I'm a nursing student, do you track that after they graduate to see if they do actually get a job? And do they get jobs in Pennsylvania or do they move on to somewhere else?
Multiple questions, all good. First of all, 90% of our students are Pennsylvania students. They come from Pennsylvania schools. Close to 90% of those have typically and historically stayed in Pennsylvania when they graduate. I'm talking about from our system now. Right. And at last count, and we just got the question in the House, I think the figure that we have is some 80% of those who graduate and stay in Pennsylvania are working in field.
Oh, that's a very high number.
It's a very high number.
Yes, I'm surprised. I didn't have a clue what it would be, but that's a very high number. I'm glad it's working out that well. Everybody is staying in that. And sort of kind of next question leads me into the transfer system. We've talked about this in the past, transferring from community college or from college to college. When you find out you're going here and you want to change your degree and you have somebody else specializes in nursing over here. Right. How does that working out? Is it working okay with you in the community college and you between college and college in your system? Are there anything to be to tweak or try and help you with to tweak or something?
The short answer is it is working. The longer answer is it needs to work much better than it is. This state still needs to do much more by way of creating a more seamless system of transfer for community college students to a baccalaureate degree granting institution. And the state has done work on this before I came, but I think there is still more to do to make sure that a student who takes courses, passes courses, and pays for courses at a community college is assured that if they have passed them with an appropriate grade, will not be told, well, that's close enough, but not for us. Yeah. A deal is a deal. I think we also can do better in terms of recruiting community college students. Just because the opportunity exists only makes it available to those who know that it exists. And we have sat down with the community colleges and once, and we're about to do it again in a month, I think, to talk about how we can better cross-market that transfer opportunity. so that students not only know it's there, know what they have to do to prepare for that transfer to assure that it is as seamless as possible. We're also getting ready to do a couple of very interesting things. I don't want to talk about it today because we're going to be rolling it out in the next few weeks. But by sitting down with the community college people and developing some articulation agreements across the two sectors, some real opportunities for students that they're going to be able to take advantage of to better access an associate degree / baccalaureate degree. So we're working on those. Lois, this is like a ventriloquist act. Lois is telling me that 3,000 new community college transfers are in our system this year. And that's good. But I believe, most believe, we can do much, much better on the community college transfer side. There's a lot of moving parts with it. The good news is we're having regular conversations. I commend, by the way, the community college. They have a certain challenge. They're not a system. I'm used to 28 community colleges who are part of a system, have their own board, their own chancellor. These are 14 individual institutions other than name and mission, and they have banded together as best they can and are working with us as an organization of 14 universities because they understand it too, and I really credit them. We're a system. We're all in it together. We're a little easier to deal with and navigate as far as one entity, but I can't say enough about how they've reached across and want to work with us in that regard.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad it's sort of kind of working out and you're continuing to talk, but I think dialogue is going to be very important as we go forward, no matter where we're at in the educational system. We don't talk, we don't get anywhere, so I appreciate your support and we'll look forward to helping you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Vogel. Senator Rafferty.
Thank you. One quick question, but before that, there was an article in the Philadelphia Inquirer, I think 3 weeks ago, about the struggling private school systems here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the private colleges, I should say. And I see it destined for our schools as well, our public schools and our state-related. And I have 2 state-related degrees, so I'm glad that you're looking at what can be done. When I came into the Senate, I was saying, why are we still building dorms on some of these college campuses? The population growth isn't there, because I'd come from a school district. And so I'm glad that we're making some finally some wise business decisions. Drew, congratulations to you. I was Student Senate President at University of Pittsburgh at Johnstown, so I know the duties and responsibilities that you carry in that position, so best wishes to you. So congratulations, Chancellor, on doing that. The other question I have is something that a population, and I asked the state related to this, a student population that we know is growing and they're coming back and they need some direction and education and finding jobs, are veterans. We see more coming back from Afghanistan and from Iraq, and what are the state system schools doing to not only attract the veterans, to counsel them and try to put them in the right direction for careers, if you will?
Well, I am not new anymore, that's for sure, under any rubric, but I'm still new enough to be able to commend Pennsylvania for its approach to veterans. Those who already live here and those who come here from other places, and the body of work that's been done in this General Assembly on veterans and veterans issues, and then extrapolate that to the system I'm proud to be the chancellor of and what these folks do at their universities in terms of cutting cost, giving greater information, ease of information, Senator. Just because somebody comes back from a deployment, musters out, and then now wants to go with a GI Bill, get a degree at IUP, doesn't necessarily mean they know exactly how to do that. Because many of our veterans are first time in college, just like many of our traditional first generation students. Others come with certain skill sets and they come with credits already have been racked up. And so we have been working very hard to make sure that we make it as easy as possible for those students to matriculate in our systems, to cross credit, make sure that they don't lose credits unnecessarily, and to always, and every university now has one, have a person at the university who is the go-to person at East Stroudsburg for veterans on veterans issues. The big hue and cry we used to hear from veterans across country was that we don't know who to talk to about very specific issues that nobody else knows about, which are veterans issues. Now each of our universities is equipped with that coordination of effort. I think 11 out of our 14 universities have secured the federal designation of veteran-friendly universities, which is remarkable, and I know the others are after it. big time. So we're doing our best in that regard.
Well done, Chancellor. I'm very happy to hear that. That led to one thought for another question since I stole some green. Do we give for not only our veterans but older students that may be going back to college, do we give any kind of real life experience for credits towards their degrees? And if so, how's that work?
If I may, Senator,
sure,
there are several mechanisms, but the primary one is to look for credit for prior learning, and there are a number of established rubrics for evaluating that, and I think that all 14 of us make that available with various levels of application to that. So that is available to provide academic credit for life experience. It's a very rigorous process. It involves some testing, evaluation, a portfolio of what's actually been done. So it's not a matter of you worked for 10 years, here's your degree, but rather let's look at what you've learned in that and make sure that you can move ahead.
Great, thank you very much, and Drew, once again, best wishes to you. It's hard to believe that it was just 15 years ago I sat in your seat. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Hey, I mentioned this, Mr. Chairman, to the House. Drew left off the rest of the story regarding his brother. His brother now plays professional basketball in Europe and is playing for the team in Dublin, Ireland, as we speak. So it's quite a successful family.
Thank you, absolutely.
Is that in field, by the way?
Senator Temple is followed by Senator Vance.
Good afternoon. Chancellor, Governor Wolf has asked for $1 million in support of Pennsylvania being involved in the national It's On Us movement against sexual violence in various educational settings. And I know that the state system has supported that effort. Can you talk a little bit about what that funding will mean for the system's ability and for other educational settings' ability to combat sexual violence?
Yes, sir. Good question. And yes, we have, as a system, all 14 universities signed on to the It's On Us movement, which is a national effort on the issue of regarding sexual assault and sexual violence at all of our university campuses. We had the kickoff for that just about how it all runs together, 5 weeks ago, I guess, thereabouts, to announce our participation along with the state relateds, and probably most of the privates, I would think and hope. To that end, you would understand this. Not arguably the most often looked at issue by prospective students and their parents is not first the academic program, it is first, is this a safe and disciplined environment? For parents, where I'm about to deposit my child, and for students, am I going to feel safe and comfortable on this campus? This is the hottest issue in the United States today. It has forevermore changed the landscape of higher education. Shouldn't surprise you either that our 14 universities make this an everyday responsibility. How they're organized around students, how they provide awareness, education, if sadly necessary, how they reclaim students who have been victims of crime, whether it is sexual or otherwise. It is an incredibly important part of each university's being. What dollars like this can do, whatever our share of that will be, is to help also understand that there are costs associated with doing these things. You just don't automatically have a safe campus. You have to put in programs and activity and personnel to help assure that. And it's our hope that, especially on this one, not only are we going to be able to seek and gain some dollars to help support those efforts, but one of the great things about the It's On Us program is it makes it clear that a student who may end up being a perpetrator of sexual violence didn't just flip a switch when they walked onto a university campus and say, I've lived 18 years this way, I'm going to live the next 4 years in a very different and dramatic way. These things go all the way back in children's lives, and they don't just start when they become a freshman or a sophomore or a junior. And one of the things this program does that I really like is tie together K through 12 and higher education. To make sure that we're talking with one another and working with another and creating, even at the lower end, more education and awareness programs to try to help stem the tide of these tragedies and see if we can ultimately turn them into a positive. So we're excited about it. but it is serious business, this issue of campus safety. Last on the issue, because it's an important issue and because it's also important in our marketing, we lay our crime statistics up against the surrounding municipalities' crime statistics, and generally speaking, I'm safe in saying this, our crime statistics typically are lower than the municipalities that surround our universities. That's not a competitive statement because theirs aren't off the charts in most cases. It's just that we have got to, as we run these small cities, which are universities, make sure that that is the underpinning of everything that we do. It not only hurts our bottom line, we also have the in loco parentis responsibility of taking care of the health, safety, and welfare of our students, our faculty, our staff, and visitors to our campuses, and we take it seriously. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thanks for your support for the program. One other question while I have time. Does the system track what percentage of graduates stay in Pennsylvania after graduation, and does it track that data over a period of time? I mean, one of the thoughts that I've always had, and it's reflected in some legislation that Senator Brown and I are co-primes on, is if we're going to invest financial resources in helping students get their educations, then we should make sure that that investment doesn't go away to another state after they graduate and we don't suffer brain drain. And I wasn't sure what kind of data you track on that, and if you could provide that data to us.
Yes, sir. You ask a great question. The short answer is over 80% of our students, as I say, stay here in Pennsylvania after they graduate. That is a markedly different percentage than you'll find in systems all over the country, including the one I just came from, and better satisfies exactly that issue, and it's spot on, which is if we're going to invest in the education of all these students, what's the ROI in terms of how many of them are going to actually stay here and work here? They all don't. They never will. But the good news here is 90% of our students are Pennsylvania students, and well over 80% of those, by statistic, are going to stay right here and become our employment base and our quality of life contributors. We're real proud of that.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Vance, followed by Senator Wagner.
Chairman, Drew, I want to tell you, if you're indicative of all the students coming out of the state system, we're going to be very fortunate. You're very well spoken, and you're a credit to your institution. It's very nice to have you today.
Thank you, Senator.
I want to go back to a question that Senator Baker asked, but I didn't hear you answer, and maybe it was my fault. How much do employees pay for their health care? I don't think you answered that question.
I didn't, but we think it's about $3,800. Lois is going to see if we've got a more exact figure in here. I can tell you, Senator, that we have one of the best health care plans in all of higher education in this Pennsylvania state system of higher education itself. We've just made some modifications to contribution rates because part of the problem is we're having difficulty continuing to afford it. But even with those changes, it is a Cadillac plan, and we're very proud of it.
Thank you. I looked when you had the percentages and where the percentage change in what the majors were, and I was kind of surprised. I know that education was going to be down. That didn't surprise me. But that most projections say that healthcare is going to be the biggest, and yet you're only showing a 9% increase, as opposed to, and you have to tell me what interdisciplinary studies with military studies are, because there's a 27% increase.
Yes, those are returning veterans and others, yes, who are mixing and marrying the studies they have with the studies they have with us. Yes, and that I really do footnote that those percentages on projected increases, we missed it last year on health. We projected it lower than it actually ended up being. We use whatever the going rate is at that time, but we know that it may vary in the future, and oftentimes does.
One of the most frequent calls that I get into my district office are for substitute teachers. And I was sitting here thinking, is there any way that you could come up with a program in your education departments to provide substitute teachers? Maybe they need refresher courses. There's definitely a huge need out there. It's not only do we get calls, but we have it in our local papers constantly. They're looking for substitute teachers. So maybe that's something that some niche you could fill.
Having been a substitute teacher at one point in my career, I understand why there exists a tremendous void in people who are willing to serve in that capacity. No, it's...
I have been a substitute school nurse, so I've been there too.
You know. No, that's a great idea.
A couple of curiosity questions. What's the average number of hours that a faculty member teaches in a week?
I'm sorry, say it again, please.
Average number of hours that a faculty member teaches in a week.
Our faculty, our full-time faculty are required.
Full-time?
Yes, our full-time faculty are required to teach 4 sections per semester. So if you line that up with credits, each 3-credit course is a section if you look at it that way. There are exemptions. People can be removed from that 4-section obligation for serving in other functions up to 2. So somebody, the one I use is if somebody, because it's the easiest one that comes to mind, if somebody is elected as the APSCUF president at that institution, they are given one of those 4 sections off to see after those duties. If somebody is the chair of a curriculum committee, they can be given relief from one of those 4, but 4 is what they are required to have.
How would that average out for hours per week?
What do you think, that
17
hours?
About 17 hours, including office time.
Yes. Yes, because
17 hours, I'm sorry, including off time?
No, 17 hours.
I didn't hear what she said.
No, it's okay. 17 hours, including required office time for the professors.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And what's your student-to-faculty ratio?
I've got it. It is, there's a couple of numbers. Faculty-student ratio is 19.5 to 1. That's just the number of faculty divided into the number of students, but the actual classes, start again. Average class size, 29. Faculty-to-student ratio, 19.5 to 1. Again, the ratio is just the number of faculty divided into the number of students. The actual class size comes from the roster in exactly how many students are in classes, and then an average run from that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Senator Vance, Senator Wagner, followed by Senator Eichelberger.
Chancellor, good afternoon.
Senator, good afternoon.
Drew, you're going to get a little bit different education today. I have a different spin, but listen, I appreciate your being here, and I appreciate your comments. But you made one comment, and it was very interesting, and I'm glad you told us that young people feel their pockets are being picked, and you are exactly right. And you are in the building that is doing it, and we're doing it good. And so I have a lot of questions, and my questions, just a little bit of my background. I'm in the waste business, and I'm not a college graduate, and spent a semester at York College taking business classes. But I've learned by fire, but I will tell you, in my life, this is the most important thing, and this is the financial statement. I don't know if you've seen a copy of it, but it's there's a firm in Harrisburg that does it, and I've looked through this extensively. So I think maybe I'll be able to shed some light on my spin from a financial side. Chancellor, I appreciate all your comments, and I want to be careful that I think sometimes these meetings get into a micromanaging situation, and honestly, in my world, I don't appreciate people that micromanage. I'll just give them the keys and say if they can do it better, do it. But I'm concerned. The bottom line is, and I think you have started the dialogue. We are out. We have no more runway here. And I will tell you that where I'm coming from, I will not vote for any tax increases. I will lobby my colleagues that we cannot, number one, the people out on the street, the average blue-collar family in Pennsylvania cannot afford more school taxes, real estate taxes, personal income, sales tax, and the list is endless. So a couple things that I've, through the conversation, and Rich Alloway, Senator Alloway, touched on this. I'm a believer if you have schools that are technically, in my world, underperforming or unprofitable, they should be closed, and they should be closed quickly. And we don't need a task force, and we don't need to micromanage, and or analyze and become caught up in analysis paralysis. So what I'm doing is I'm taking a 40,000-foot view. And so I'm going to start running through your financial statement. But on page 7, it talks about assets, cash and investments, and it shows 1.3 as of 6/30 last year of 15. And I think you mentioned your reserves were 650. So maybe at a later time, I would like to understand that more. And I don't think this is the place, because your statement is semi-complicated and there are a lot of things. But I would like to understand, the reserves. I'm going to move to page 9. Page 9, down in the right-hand corner, says interest expense on capital asset-related debt was $36.6 million, a decrease of $0.03 million over fiscal year. I'm curious what that interest rate is on, and the interest expense is on, and what is the interest rate? I don't need to know that today. But if somebody would know that, that would be interesting.
We are noting that. We'll get that for you.
And what, I'll tell you, I'm moving in a direction where our school districts around the state of Pennsylvania are sitting on $4.5 billion worth of cash reserves. We have $2.5 billion sitting here in Harrisburg in many, many different bank accounts. Some of the money's restricted, but quite frankly, that $4.5 billion and the $2.5 billion, which totals $7 billion, is not really getting any interest. So if you're paying any interest, there has to be, in the business world, businesses sweep bank accounts every single day against lines of credit. And I think we have to start understanding where, if you have debt, what the debt costs, and potentially is there an opportunity to use this cash in some form. Maybe you have to have an institution involved.
Yes, sir, we do that. We sweep our accounts and put them in interest-bearing accounts.
So my question is, if you're sweeping your accounts, what are you getting interest-wise? So I mean, it's a larger conversation. So if I go to page 10, it talks about employee health care costs. And, relative to the question that Senator Vance has, and I think, last fall when you were going through a transition where you were increasing health care costs to, non-teaching staff, and I think there was a pretty big uproar over that. But I went back through, and the chart you showed me, the average contribution in your system is 15%, and if you use the U.S. average, it's 28.2%. If you were to factor, and that is very accurate, the private sector is typically 25 to 30% in that range. And at my company, we run in the 25 range. If you were to use 28.2, the national average, against your health care contributions on the part of the people in your system, it's $42 million. And so, frankly, I don't think, my personal opinion and what I've seen, in overall throughout the whole state system, that the contributions that are being made are not anywhere near probably what Drew's parents are possibly paying a lot more. I know people in the audience, so I think it's something that we have to understand. You're also challenged because you have roughly 11,000 unionized employees. So then I moved to page 14, and this is a real challenge for us on the Appropriations Committee. But in September of 2015, the board approved collective bargaining units with 5 of its labor unions, which combined represent about 4,700 professional staff. The increase was 2.25% to 2.5%. And I have to point out that the rate of during a hearing last week with the Treasury Secretary, the rate of inflation between the Pittsburgh and Philadelphia CPI index was negative 0.02%, and our revenue is 3 to 4%. If you take health care costs that you're talking about, and your wage increases, and possibly your pension costs, your compensation costs are going up at least 10% a year. This is a trend that cannot continue. It's unsustaining. So I picked up on that. I'm also curious, on page 20 of your financial statement, it was a restatement for pension liability and related expense of 720, it was like almost 721 million. Can you tell us a little bit about, because that's a very significant number.
Yes, sir. That is with the change that is now in place that requires us to book all of the unfunded liability. That has changed, and so you've seen a spike. Clearly, there is a major spike between last year and this year. You'll see it in many places in state government where we used to book unfunded liability really up against what we were staring at in the short run. We are now required to book the entire unfunded liability, and that has dramatically increased that number that people will see. You'll see some of it this year. I think it's a 2-year process. You'll see a continued spike for next year, and then it will still be large, but it will level off. But that is as a result of that, Senator.
Well, that actually took your equity position to a negative from almost 750 million.
Indeed.
And so if I go to page 44, this outlines a large number of bonds, and as of 6/30/15, there was approximately 800 million in bonds outstanding, and I calculated the interest rates on the balances, and the average interest rate is 4.63%. And if I could point out to my colleagues that, again, we have this $4.5 billion sitting in school district bank accounts, $2.5 billion sitting up here, and there has to be a mechanism. We have to figure a mechanism that we could save you money and at least achieve, say, 3%, on our money. And then finally going through, I just have some other comments, but going through your financial statement on page 47, authorized expenditure, these are construction commitments, authorized expenditures for construction projects as of 6/30/15 and 14 were approximately 69 million and 75 million. I would like to point out that you're choking, okay? We're choking. But meanwhile, we're paying, I'm sure these are all prevailing wage projects. If you just trim 15% off of the total projects are 144 million. If you just pulled off 15%, it's $21.7 million. And so I think it's time we start really focusing on this prevailing wage issue. So, I think a later discussion, and I think, I appreciate your financial statement. One thing we did ask for, and I don't know if you had received it, you gave us a list of all new hires since July 1st of 2015 and compensation. Is it possible to get a list of all people in the system? Because I was looking through here, and I didn't see the January 15th, and I looked through and I was looking for the, Drew, I didn't know if you knew that the swim coach at Westchester made $420,000 last year. I didn't know if you knew, so you might want to consider swim coaching as your new career. But I'm very curious, I want to look at the compensation, because we have to understand all the moving parts. And finally, you talked about the different. Not everyone is in the state pension system, but what would the average college professor earn? What would his W-2 earnings be? An average.
The full, because there's two levels there. The full-time professor, and I knew this off the top of my head.
97 is the average.
Is it 97? $97,000 a year is the average for a full-time professor.
That would obviously be skewed with the new hires, which are, they're in, a lot of them are in the 50 to 60 range, the new hires. So let me ask you, if understanding the pension system, I'm sure I've seen the numbers, but you have some professors in the 120 range, 125, 130. If they retire, what is the percentage that they retire with of their salary? What's the factor?
It's 2.5.
Yeah, it does depend on the number.
It depends on when they entered service.
Let's say it's a 25-year. I'm just a rough number.
2.5.
Whether or not they're in with retirement program.
Yeah,
2.5.
It also depends on which I'm not hedging on you. Just there's a variety of factors, including which retirement program they're in. But
if they're in the service program and they have 35 years of service, their multiplier is 2.5.
Okay.
So Chairman Brown, of a salary of 130, help me out here. It's been a long day. So what would the annual amount be if they retired at 25 years with a salary of 130.
Post-tax, 87.5% of final average salary.
Okay. So, Drew, for your education, so the professor that's in your classroom that's getting ready to retire after 25 years, that maybe is making 125 a year, he's going to retire with 100,000 a year for the rest of his life. That's where your pockets are being picked, because while it's a system was set up, we cannot sustain this. And you know, there are some people in the state system. The top two people get 477,000 and 455 respectively. So it's great you're here today. I'm sure you have learned a lot, and there's a lot more to learn, but you're right, your pockets are being picked. So I would start wearing pants with zippers on, because your wallet's about ready to be taken away from you. So thank you. But we will follow up with these.
Yes, sir.
With the
and Senator, that's one of the reasons that we say when we talk about reorganization and modernization, that's why I use the phrase, everything has got to be on the table, not just some things, or it won't work.
Well, I'll be frank with you.
Let's wrap up, please. Let's wrap up.
Chancellor, you're the only one that's been in here that's talking about everything's on the table. It's all, no, I got to protect this and I have to protect that. This day's over. We're out of runway. Thank you.
So many questions in so limited time, but we'll definitely have an opportunity we've had in the past to exchange information back and forth as we go forward. Thank you, Senator Wagner. Senator Eichelberger, followed by Senator Volakovich.
At 97 grand, these are the people that are working 17 hours a week. Wow. Can I get a sign-up list here going in the Senate? I bet you get quite a few applicants. You and I had a conversation about this recently, and I just wanted to make this clear. We had some conversation among members, and then I brought it up yesterday with the DGS, or yesterday or day before with the DGS secretary, but I used the incorrect terminology here. I asked him about a PLA bidding procedure, and he said they don't do that. I should have said best value bidding procedure. As I understand it, in some cases anyway, as has been explained to me by constituent, that the bidding procedure can lend itself to increased costs and longer bid times, sometimes rebidding, sometimes projects get canceled or get delayed for a long period of time because the bids get so large that they become unaffordable. And when I ask you about that, you said that sometimes you can bid those out yourself, and sometimes DGS bids those out on your behalf. Do you know if there's anything we can do legislatively to allow you to bid them out on a regular basis? And I asked the state relateds, and they're going to get back to us on how they handle their bidding procedures. They didn't know.
Right. You know, we touched on this earlier, but you've magnified the issue with that question. I think the short answer is anytime we can be allowed out of legislation that dictates terms and conditions of procurement or bid that are for purposes of paying special attention to increases in areas associated, there is always the possibility in the free market that you're going to do better. Right. If you're not bound to those certain numerators and denominators. I mean, it's simple math. So in that regard, because when we can't do our own, we are bound to all of those numerators and denominators, and there are costs and percentage increases associated with just that.
Yeah, and we're talking real money here, so people understand. We're talking millions of dollars.
We're talking about big projects, so the amount of money is going to be, yes, much larger. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so... Well, all my other questions were taken, so I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Senator Eichelberger. Senator Volakovich, followed by Senator Wozniak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your pension plan, pensions are a little different in your groupings. You got a kind of tri-system there. I'm going to make a request of you, and I'll try to make sense out of it. If the fiscal year 08-09 through and including fiscal year 16-17, you'll have numbers for that, like you said, you probably have them in the book. For each of the pension plans, like TIACREF, the complement employees that you had in that system for those years, and the payment that you had to make towards those employees under that system. And the same for SERS, and the same for PESERS. Okay?
Possible to do, I would think.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, okay.
Yes, sir.
And I don't need any of that stuff now. You can.
We'll turn that
get
around
there.
for you.
Okay.
Give it to the chairman.
DGS is involved with your capital improvements, right?
Yes,
okay. Who actually carries the debt? Do each individual school facilities, the 14, each carry their own debt?